I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Anders Walter and Rebecca Pruzan, who are both nominated for the Oscar for Best Live Action Short Film for a very stunning and beautiful film called Ivalu. And I want to know exactly where the genesis of this came from. Was this, Anders, was this something that you came up with, or where did this story come from?
This it's based on a Danish graphic novel by the same name that came out 4 or 5 years ago, a critical acclaimed graphic novel. And I was at a dinner with one of my friends, and she said, Anders, I came upon this graphic novel. She works in Greenland. And I really think you should turn it into a short film. And I asked her, what is it about? And she said, it's about incest, but it's really beautiful told and really poetic. And then I said, oh no, I can't. Ooh, that's too much. I can't do a movie about incest. That's just too difficult. And then she said, check out the comic book. And then I went to my local comic book pusher a couple of days later and got a copy of the graphic novel. And she was right. The graphic novel was really striking and really special and unique. Very powerful, very poetic, like she said. And just the way it kind of used nature as part of the storytelling. And it was just the whole story about dealing with incest just came across in a totally different way than I would expect anyone to handle that subject matter. So, and right from that moment, I knew I wanted to turn it into a short. And then I shared the book with Rebecca and my other producer, Kim. And I guess they felt the same way.
So, Rebecca, what was your initial response to this? Because it is, on the surface, such a tough subject to tackle.
Definitely. Well, but I mean, my reaction was very similar to Anders. But it's a very short story, the graphic novel. But I mean, if you see it, it's so beautiful. The colors, it's the most beautiful colors in the drawings, and so the whole contrast between the beautiful nature and the landscape, and then this devastating, brutal story. The contrast is so strong, and I mean, I remember I was reading it in our sofa, and it made me cry, and I was like, this is something I really, really want to do. And I spoke to Kim Magnuson, who is also my husband, and said, this is definitely something we need to do. And he read it and he agreed. And from there on, it was pretty much just, our job to do whatever we could to make Anders make this story come alive in a book or in a film.
I think that the contrast is the thing that I picked up on the most when I was watching the film, because it is incredibly beautiful. I mean, and those colors are so vibrant within the film, and yet it's set against the backdrop of this absolutely terrible story. And so I guess my question is, how as filmmakers do you balance the poetry of the imagery with the story that you're telling?
I think there's obviously a balance when you're dealing with such a sensitive subject matter. I think for me, it was always about not coming across as too naive, because the graphic novel is a bit different compared to the way we end the film. At least in the film version, there's a slight opening of, pointing in a direction of some kind of hope, a tiny bit of hope. In the graphic novel, it was really dark. There was just no mercy. So to add on that extra opening and to work with a different opening in the film, it was always about trying to find that balance where you don't deal with this in a naive way, where you kind of end up with a point that it's you just have to do so and so in order to fix this problem. That would be the worst for me. But at least we also felt some kind of responsibility in terms of pointing in some direction. And by researching and talking to a lot of experts on this subject matter, we did learn that the community around incest victims, the community of people, family or friends, is so important for this to have a happy ending, or at least a more positive ending. So we added the character of the grandmother, just to at least lift Ivalu, the younger sister, into some kind of a more positive future for her. And basically saying, if there's people around you and if there's people who's paying attention to this, then there's a slight chance that some of these kids could be saved and live a more positive future. That was not in the graphic novel, so it was always about that balance. But I think both Rebecca and I was really very much in line on that. We had to kind of open that ending up a little bit, and so we did.
The sheer beauty of the landscape that you're dealing with, that must present its own unique set of challenges to capture the story that the environment is like another character in it. So what were some of the challenges in terms of capturing this very unique landscape?
For me, that was the beauty of the story also in the graphic novel. I thought it was almost like it was a character in itself, the nature. And also that's why we ended up doing this in Greenland. And I think that was also the reason why they did the comic book, and having the story take place in Greenland. Because the nature in itself becomes a character in a way that it somehow becomes the symbolic visuals for that solitude and lonesome feeling that this girl is experiencing. And she starts out looking for her sister in nature, and then the nature becomes more and more hostile and cold, and really becomes an image of what she feels on the inside. So I think a lot of the symbolic storytelling comes from nature in this film, and the nature was very important. And also in Greenland, nature plays a big part in the way they live life. They're so close to nature, and the same with the Greenlandic myths we use. We have this one myth about the mother of the sea. So all this combined, I think for me, was a way of actually turning this into a film that was told with images and not only scenes where people are talking, because we don't have a lot of scenes here where people are talking. It's mostly imagery and obviously the voiceover that becomes the music of the film. So that was really the big reason for me to be so excited about telling this story by using nature and adding this extra poetic layer to the story.
And Rebecca, what are some of the logistical aspects of being able to film there? Because I would imagine you don't just drop in and say, hey, we're going to film a movie here. I mean, walk us through that process, because I think that process is fascinating.
Well, and it was a very long process, because not only did we have, the nature and the weather, being such a factor that we had to take into account, but we also had this little thing called COVID that we had to deal with. So therefore, the film kept being postponed because of COVID, and actually we also had to do the casting via Zoom, because we couldn't just go there, and because the country was closed at that point. But so we were very fortunate, working very closely with the Greenlandic co-production company, Polorama. And they were very, very, they helped us when we were doing the whole shooting plan, and with everything we did it very closely with them, because we couldn't just make this as a normal short film, doing it in a few days. We had to really take into account all the time that there could be a snowstorm. The weather there changes so, from 1 minute to the other, and it's extreme. You're in Northern California, we're in Denmark. Well, Northern California can be a little crazy too, but this weather is just, it can be dramatic. But so even though we had planned to, in every sense, so we were, super sure that we wouldn't be, caught up, but we were just so lucky. Everything just worked out really, really well. But we had tremendous help from the local people who, when we were out shooting in, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit, it was -18 degrees. close to Kangerlussuaq, the Russell Glacier, and we had a local guide, Adam Liebeck, who took us there in his big van with it was so cold, and he came with hot cocoa and a perfect sense of weather. So we were working with children who had Mila, who had to run across the ice. We had to make super sure that everything was really, really safe for her and for us. And we were so lucky. He had this fantastic relationship with nature. And I asked him, can we really, how do you know this? And he was like, the ice whispers to me. So, we couldn't have done this, without the help that we got from the local people.
I'm so glad you brought up the casting, because this little girl has to carry such a huge weight in this film because of the subject matter, but also because she is the primary kind of character. And so I'm curious what that casting process was like, and how you worked with her to keep her safe, both physically and emotionally, in tackling this sort of subject matter.
Yeah, Mila was a very strong girl, and she also had a very strong family to support her. Her mom was with her every day, and obviously, going into the casting process, we knew we had to look for children who had the necessary support from their families. Because one thing is to be on set and take them through a scene, or even the greater scope of a story, but also coming back at night and having to live through some of these scenes, you need to make sure that there is the necessary support all the way around. And Mila certainly had that. Besides from the obviously talent as an actress, she also had that family support. But we all agreed that when we got to see her casting tape, that she was the one. It wasn't like there was 100 girls to choose from, but I think we looked at maybe 10 or 20 different girls. But for sure, Mila was the one who was shining the brightest. And I felt like she just added on to that bright star that we saw on the casting tapes for each day that we were up there shooting. She just kept becoming more and more trusting to her own intuition, and we of course got a nice relationship. But also, because it was in Greenlandic, I had a tremendous help in my co-director, Ivalu Jørgensen, who's a Greenlandic director herself, quite a strong voice. And because there was definitely times when the music of the language is very different from what I'm normally used to. So there were times when I couldn't really call if the take was good or bad. And there was times where I would think that, wow, that was a great take. I really felt that. And then my co-director who speaks the language were like, no, it was totally bad. We have to redo it. So that was quite a challenge. But it all comes down to, as a director at least, for me to become friends with them. I have done now 7 short films and 2 features, and they all have young ones in the big parts. It's becoming their friend, and I think trusting them, as not talking to them like they're kids or trying to talk down to them, really try to meet them at eye level, because they will get it. Of course, there were certain things you would want to hide a little bit from Mila, but at the same time, she had to understand the full scope of what was going on. And but there was a lot of good people around her. But I think a safe environment always comes with, for me at least, becoming their friend and just becoming someone they can relax around and feel safe to perform around and feel safe to act stupid. I think if kids feel safe that they can act stupid or say stupid things, then their shoulders come down, and then they start to trust their little fine-tuned instrument, which is what you want as a director.
It's almost like bringing that sense of play and that sense of make-believe, which is really what acting is, isn't it?
True, very much so. It's really constructing some kind of a room of fantasy where everything is okay, and everything can happen. And she was a very emotional girl. I think for anyone who's so good as Mila, you have to be in some kind of special contact with your inner emotions. And she had the courage to trust those inner feelings and to share them with us and share them with the camera and me and everybody else. So it's I think it's always special when you meet these kids who have this, because they're not trained actors. They're not relying on some kind of training or instrument. It's really because I think they have the courage to trust their instincts and their intuition. And when that happens, it's really strong and sometimes more powerful than working with actors who are trained.
So, going into the Oscars is such a big thing, and one of the things I love in talking to people in short film is that it is this kind of like, somebody I spoke to the other day equated it to like being like an athlete going to the Olympics, and Anders, you of course have been there before, but Rebecca, this is, I would assume, a new experience for you. So what is it like just when that nomination comes around?
Well, for me, this is actually, I mean, for everyone, this is a crazy situation to be in. I think this is actually my first film. So it's also an even more crazy ride. But I think I mean, for everyone, when we were sitting there watching the nomination being read out loud, it was like a bomb, from that second when we heard him pronounce, I think he said Ivalu or some funny way. And, it was like everything just went, an explosion of happiness and joy. And we had Mila, she was with her mother, and it was just such a fantastic joy to experience this recognition of the film and of all the hard work that so many people had put into this film. And everyone now, it's a huge reward for every single person who's participated in making this film come alive.
Anders, are you going to give Rebecca some tips on navigating Oscar night?
Oh, but you know what? Rebecca has been there before. She just, not as a nominee, but Kim Magnussen, her wonderful husband, who's also a producer on this film. I believe Rebecca was also sitting next to me when I won the Oscar in 2014. So Rebecca definitely knows her way around. She knows the infrastructure of the Kodak Theater and how many minutes you're supposed to spend on the red carpet. So all that she can do much better than I can. No, I think for all of us, anyone who's nominated, I can't believe I'm there again 9 years later. So for me, it's just an extra chance to come back and enjoy it. I told myself in 14, keep, just focus on enjoyment and enjoying this and not be too hyped up, just take it all in. And of course, that's almost impossible. And now I get a second chance. Wiser.
I've been next to you for both nominations. And I think the reaction that came this time was even much. I mean, you were so happy, you were crying. I don't think you cried the first time. I think I don't think you can get used to this.
That's because I'm a parent now, Rebecca, and they were there. My children were there.
Yeah.
Well, both of you, I'm so excited because again, this is one of the reasons why I love, the fact that this category is still a part of the show, and because we get to talk to great filmmakers who are making great films that we all now get to see on a wider scale. So congratulations to both of you. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Oscars, and stay tuned for interviews with more nominees in the coming weeks. Anders, Walter, Rebecca Pruzan, the film is Ivalu. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.